Hey yo, welcome back to Poplar Creek Farm. Tonight I want to talk to you guys about something that I think is one of the most important things with gardening. It is probably the most important seed or crop that you can sow in your garden, and that is cover crops. So if you've never heard of the term cover crop and have no idea what I'm talking about, well, I'll tell you. Cover crop is basically a crop that you plant on the off season. So when you're not planting crops for harvesting in your garden, you plant it then. So a lot of people plant it in the fall. Instead of doing a fall garden, they'll oftentimes plant it then. You could also plant it in early spring because typically most of these cover crops are frost hardy or can at least maybe not germinate in the frost, but they can survive through frost and continue to add benefit to our garden. So what cover crops, the intent of cover crops is basically to add nutrients to our soil and hold nutrients. Basically, if we have bare soil, think about all the wildfires in California and all those bare mountains and all that bare soil because of all the fires and the way it has, gotten rid of all the foliage. What happens if it rains? All those nutrients, all that soil is washed away. Not that if you have a flat garden, it's going to all, you're gonna have mud all over your yard. No, but it does wash nutrients away. So if we have a cover crop, it holds onto our soil and it holds onto nutrients with its roots. It basically it's like a placeholder, but it also oftentimes adds nutrients. So most often we choose cover crops that will add things like nitrogen to our soil. Many of us lack nitrogen in our soil, or we plant crops that pull so much nitrogen out that we have to replace it in some way. So cover crops are one of the best ways to add nitrogen back to your soil. They also add a lot of other trace minerals, but nitrogen is one of the biggest that we add. The other thing that they do, so cover crops do a multitude of things, but the other thing they do is choke out weeds. So when you have bare soil, something's gonna germinate, especially if you have weeds anywhere in the area of your garden. Seeds can travel a long way. And so if you have bare soil, weeds are gonna pop up. So instead of having to tarp your garden or cover it or, just have to deal with weeds all the time, cover crops are the best for that. They take the place of your plants and they choke out weeds. If you guys have ever had really, really bushy plants, think about a zucchini plant and how bushy they get. Underneath that zucchini plant, how many weeds grow? Not that many. Yes, you'll have a few, and you will always have a few. You're always gonna have some weeds. That's not something you can magically get rid of completely. But you have less. And it's the same idea with cover crops. Now, another thing that cover crops do, I feel like I'm one of those infomercials. And wait, there's more. But really, cover crops also are really, really good at tilling soil. So here in upstate New York, and around the country, but New York is very well known for having clay soil. We have clay soil. Clay soil is, if you've never seen clay soil, there's that red clay, which is a little bit more loamy type soil, but clay soil here, it is rock hard. If it is dry, it is rock hard. And when it is wet, it is a muddy, slippery mess. There's no in between. It's either rock hard or slippery, muddy mess with puddles everywhere. It doesn't absorb water super well. And so oftentimes the water sits on the top of our soil and then runs off. Again, runs off with nutrients and those minerals that we need. So we need something to hold in moisture and to till our soil, to break up our soil so that we can aerate it, because clay soil is not aerated at all. So basically, there's multiple cover crops, and I'm going to go over a few, but one of the ones that I use a lot and I really highly recommend for anybody who has clay soil or nitrogen lacking soil is clover. Clover is one of those things that, first of all, it grows like crazy, and you can actually leave it in your garden if you wanted to. Leave it in your garden through your growing season and just plant around. Kind of clear an area where you're going to plant the seed and plant it, and they can still thrive together. But they have really deep roots. They have these really skinny little roots, and if you guys have ever tried to pull clover up or tilled soil with clover in it, you would notice the roots for the plant. Clover doesn't get super, super tall. I've got some in my food forest that is probably, I don't know, a foot at most tall, but the roots are almost double that sometimes. Like, they are super, super long. They and they're these perfect little white roots, and they just go straight down. And they till up soil. So they naturally are tilling soil. And lastly, I'm sure there's other things that cover crops do that I'm not covering, but these are the main ones. Also, so in the spring, when you're done with your cover crops and you're ready to plant your garden, if you don't want to have them cohabitate, that doesn't sound right. Anyways, if you don't want them to be together in the garden, you can chop up. You can go through with a weed whacker, a mower. You can till it in as well. I mean, we plan on tilling for a few years just because our soil is so poor, so we're gonna have to till in nutrients and things to aerate it. But you're adding green material. You're adding green matter right back to your soil, which for clay soil especially helps aerate it. It also composts and breaks down and gives the soil nutrients. So cover crops can do so many things, and it is the most important thing you can do for your garden, especially if you have an in-ground garden. To amend your soil, yes, compost is obviously great. Please add compost to your soil. Manure, all those micro bacterias and good things to your soil, add them. But instead of adding things like peat moss to aerate your soil, do a cover crop. I have a hatred towards peat moss, and if you guys have been watching me for a while, you know I hate peat moss. It is so not sustainable, and it is terrible for the environment. But a lot of people use it because it does a good job at aerating soil. But if you did cover crops, you wouldn't need peat moss. I think it's truly the most important thing you can put into your garden. And this is something you can do. So if you plan on gardening next spring and you didn't garden this year, prep your bed now. Now is the time, not in spring. Although you can do cover crops in spring, I don't think they do quite as much as they do in fall, because oftentimes, like I said, these crops do well over winter, and oftentimes will continue to maybe not grow completely over winter, but they're still doing their job. They're still adding nitrogen. If there's not snow covering them, they're still working. And it's really, really a cool thing to see. So add cover crops. And then, like I said, there are multiple cover crops you can do. Now, a lot of people know of the Three Sisters gardening. So that is corn, beans, and squash. So the big reason for beans that they did, not only were they good because they went up the corn and they climbed, but also for the purpose of adding nitrogen. Legumes, beans, that family adds nitrogen to the soil. So a lot of people will do like a cover crop, and you'll see this with farmers. The only thing is a lot of cover crops that farmers do are GMO. So a lot of people add soybeans because soybeans do add nitrogen to the soil. And they also will naturally till it some. And again, you can till it right in or break it down and it'll just give to the soil. So also, many farmers add grains. There's winter grains that they will add. A lot of people call it winter grass that they add, and a lot of times they will actually use the crop, but it really is a cover crop. And so you can do that too. There's rye. You can do many different types of grains, oats, barley, wheat. Those are all really good cover crops as well. They add nitrogen, they hold the soil, they till it. You can break them down into green material. And these things aren't things that would be the the worst thing growing in your garden. She loves to do my hair. So they are, they're things that if they were to pop back up in the growing season, it wouldn't be the worst thing. Clover is huge. I think clover is one of the best cover crops you can use. I'm partly biased because I think it has worked so well for me. We actually have added it to our food forest. That is what our base of our food forest is. That is a cover crop. We do mulch it down, or we will mulch it down. We didn't actually do any mowing because it was the first year we added it, because we did just build our house. So we added that, and we will mulch down in the fall, and we'll keep adding, as it grows back, we'll keep adding mulch. So we'll basically just keep mowing it, and it adds mulch to the ground, and it gives nutrients to the soil. And we have fruit trees and berry bushes and now strawberry plants growing in there. And so those are all going to benefit from that cover crop and that nitrogen. So cover crops aren't just for your garden. They could be around your orchard. Like I said, apple trees, peach trees, any kind of fruiting trees, berry bushes, they are great for all of those things as well. We have them around, actually, elderberry, blueberry, blackberry, raspberry, cranberry, got apple, and I've got peach. So those are all things that's around. And that is, although it's a cover crop, and I'm never going to till that in and get rid of it, it is always there as a cover crop. Also, So one of the things, if you've ever watched the documentary The Littlest Big Farm, or Little Big Farm, I can't, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name of it. Apricot Lane Farms out in California, they did a documentary of their progression of their building their farm, and they use cover crops. And in places like California that are low rain, now here we typically have a lot of rain. This year I will say we did not have a lot of rain. The cover crops absorb that moisture. Instead of having flooding and runoff and loss of nutrients, your soil will hold on to these nutrients. And that is so crazy important, because then you don't have to fertilize as much. You don't have to add as much to your soil. You don't have to go out and buy loads of compost or loads of manure, or add these massive piles of compost to your soil, to your garden, to your orchard, and whatnot. That is one of the big things it helps with, is it just holds on to those nutrients so you don't lose them as quickly. Because we do lose nutrients in our soil on a regular basis with rain. Rain can wash them away. Rain can also add nutrients. But if it's not held in that soil with something, it will wash away. And one of the best examples I can tell you, and this is just mostly grass and clover that we've planted, but we built our house new, and when we moved in January, there was snow on the ground here in New York, but once spring came and all that snow melted, we had mud everywhere. Puddles, we had rain and mud going across our driveway. We have a hill kind of going down to our driveway, and it just would pour across our driveway, and it somewhat ruined part of our driveway from all the runoff. And once we planted grass seed, but we didn't have the greatest germination, so we also ended up planting some clover, and we had really good germination of that. So we have a mix of grass seed and grass and clover, which is fine because clover is the softest thing to walk on. But since then, we do not have the runoff. We do not have the puddles of water everywhere. We don't have to deal with just globs of mud everywhere, including all over my house. It really has held onto that water and that moisture, and it absorbs it, and it keeps everything right here, which is what you want. So if you can't tell, I'm a little bit passionate about cover crops, and I think it is so important for you to know. I think it's something, if people realize how beneficial cover crops could be, we would have so many less, chemical fertilizers in the store, because you don't need them if you are keeping your nutrients and adding nutrients naturally to your soil. And I am a huge supporter of composting. We've composted for many years. My kids are well aware that they do not put any apple cores or anything in the garbage. They know that it goes in the compost. So I'm not saying composting is bad in any way, but there are other things that also work and also add. And it is something you use, in conjunction with composting. I don't think it's something that replaces adding compost, but it can replace chemicals. It can replace chemical fertilizers. And if more farmers, conventional farmers, took on more of a regenerative agricultural standpoint and used more cover cropping and crop rotation, we would not have such issues with food supply and food chains as we do currently. So there's my spiel about cover crops. Please, if you guys have any questions or anything, comment below, and I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. But please look into cover crops. Look into what is best for your area, what your soil lacks, and what can add to your soil the best. Typically, you can tell by what people use around you, but cover crops still aren't widely used, so just look into what is best for the type of soil that you have. If you have sandy soil or loamy soil or clay soil, look into what is best for you and what will grow in your area. So thank you guys for joining me. Please like and subscribe and join me on the next one.